Hello everyone, hope you all are safe in this pandemic. This is Raima from BITS Pilani Hyderabad campus, and with me I have Ani, who is from the Pilani campus and will be moderating today's session. We are members of Anchor, which is the Gender and Sexuality Cell for BITS Pilani University, and we welcome you all to the first discussion of unlearning and learning with the professors. So this is going to be a short series of discussion in association with the professors of the Humanities and Social Sciences Department from BITS Pilani, BITS Goa and BITS Hyderabad. Now, it is with great pleasure that I introduce our first speaker of this series, Professor K.A. Geetha ma'am. So ma'am has nearly 2 decades of experience in teaching different modules in English literature, language and cultural studies. She's been working in BITS Goa since 2010. Her doctoral research focuses on production, institutionalization, and reception of Tamil Dalit literature. Her research interests are Dalit writing, post-colonial literature, cultural studies, and women's studies. Ma'am, we are glad to have you amidst us in this discussion about intersectionality of gender and caste in the Hindu society.
Thank you, Raima. Thanks for having me here, and thanks for Ananya. We need to create some kind of awareness amongst the students, and then I very much appreciate this initiative. The first topic that immediately comes to us as women, all of us are women over here. It's not that we're setting aside the other gender. It's not that. It's not that we are setting aside the boys or men. But then, as women, we thought that let's just look at gender issues, and in particular, when we are looking at gender, let's look at issues related to women. And then when we started discussing how we can approach this whole concept of intersectionality, of course proposed by Ananya and Taman initially, intersectionality of intersectional existence of women over here in India, and in particular, let us say, the Indian society or the Hindu society, to be more particular, because the discussion is more towards women within the caste society, caste community. So we sort of arrived at this particular topic, and then I'm very much open to this discussion, and I hope I mean you all find this interesting, and then you reflect on it. That is what is more important. Yeah.
Okay. Ma'am, that being said, can we start with our first question? Can you elaborate on the significance of societal influence on gender as a construct?
Yeah. Societal influence on gender is something that is very vast, but then let's just try and discuss the basics of it. But before we go into it, I'm just taking it as a given that all the students who are listening to this, will be listening to this conversation, do know the difference between sex and gender. Okay, sex is, of course, a biological identity, the kind of difference that is there between a male and female in terms of human anatomy. And gender is something that is related to society, how a male or a female is being constructed within a society in terms of in terms of, let's say, sexuality. Sex, gender and sexuality are all interrelated somewhere. You please understand that. And sexuality is, of course, this kind of orientation that that a man or a woman has towards sexual intercourse itself. Okay. Setting aside that, let's just come to gender, because your question was what kind of influence or what kind of impact does society has on gender construction, because gender itself is constructed. Okay, because just to quote Shimon de Beauvoir, she says that a very seminal feminist, African American feminist, she says that one is not born, but rather she's not African American. She's European. I'm sorry about it. Shimon de Beauvoir. Please edit this. One is Shimon de Beauvoir, who a very seminal feminist from Europe, of course. One is not born, but rather becomes a woman. It is civilization as a whole, and that produces this creature. This as a society produces this person called woman. A society produces this person called a man. Okay, so how does it happen? So let's just start with the birth of a baby. Okay, the minute a child is born into this world, okay, whichever society that the child belongs to, the child becomes a subject. You and I become a subject in this world, because the minute you are born into, there are societal norms, and before that, before the societal norms ever seeps into, we are born into one particular family. So there are familial norms, and and that family belongs to one particular caste, one particular religion. So all these familial values, these religious values, and the family is part of the society. The societal values are in fact imbibed by us as we grow up. So the very rituals that are associated even with the naming ceremony, what kind of names are given? See, that is also very, very important. That also comes from the society, the kind of names that are given. And these names can be somewhere associated with gods or goddesses, okay? Or it could be pertaining to one particular saint. Okay, so all these things in so many ways position us as a subject. So as we are growing up, we rarely go against it. Like I'm talking of a child who's just not exposed to the society, in the sense outside world. So as the baby is growing up, the child imbibes, let's say, the religious practices of that particular family. Like it could be, like if it happens to be a Christian family, probably the child is slowly learning all the hymns, the prayers, and then if it belongs to a Muslim family, the child is going to learn. Then of course, if it is a Hindu family, and within the Hindu family, of course, there are different castes, and then the religious practices are so diverse. The child is actually a subject. Okay, so that is where subjectivity comes in, because the minute you are born into, so who is the subject? There are different meanings, there are different connotations of the word subject itself. But within cultural studies, or in particular within gender studies, if you look at a subject, who becomes a subject? A subject is a person who's passive, who's subjected to all these norms and practices, and who's going to imbibe this. And it doesn't stop with that. The person is also going to perform it. So the gender subjectivity that we imbibe, your subjectivity is actually the other coin, the other side of your identity. So your identity is being shaped in so many ways. So you growing up as a male or a female, okay, or a man or a woman or a girl or a boy, and to add to that, okay, let us say a Christian girl, and then a Brahmin boy. Okay, so there are so many other kinds of values which are also being associated, which you are imbibing. So, and most importantly, of course, gender norms. We'll come to that, because each community shapes the gender norms. They come out with their own gender norms, and then the child imbibes it. So as we are growing up, we become, we are initially subjects. The resistance comes much later. The questioning comes much later, because of this kind of herd instinct which is there in all of us as human beings. We always want to align. We want to be with the crowd. We don't want to be the odd man out. No, that is very much there. We want to be with the peers. So we align with this, with all the norms, with all the ideologies, with all the values, and we grow up, and then that becomes our identity. It is actually shaping our psychological, mental makeup. Okay, and so we looked at gender subjectivity, that we are all subjects, that we are all passive. We passively accept the norms, because the child just takes in everything. We don't change the names. We don't question the name at all. We don't, very rarely, much later in life, we question certain norms and ideologies, especially religious ideologies, gender ideologies, all these things we question much later, when we are exposed to the broader society. But within the family, within the domestic space, it very rarely happens. No, probably once you start schooling, until the child reaches 6 or 7 years, the child takes in everything. Okay, there's hardly any questioning. Now, very much associated with this gendered subjectivity and gendered performativity, because we all perform. How is it that something that was, let's just take names, for instance, or certain practices, for instance. How is it that this has sustained over centuries? Because your great-grandmother has been following this, and then your grandmother followed it, your mother performed it, and you are performing it, and this is going to be passed on to the next generation. So what you are performing as a woman, which you have imbibed from your ancestors, okay, women ancestors, that you are passing it on. So whatever we imbibe, it's just not that it is over there. It is, we are performing it. So there is, I mean, there are 2 or 3 sides to it. There is a subjectivity, okay, that we are all subjects, and this shapes our identity. And we perform our identity, it gets revealed in so many ways. Now, very much associated with this is, of course, the body. Now, how our body is gendered. This is very, very important. It's actually a very, very important debate which is going on now, which has gone on for centuries. In fact, it's centuries in the sense it's began in the early decades of the 20th century. I mean, that's what I mean. From the latter decades of the 19th century, women had access to education that started questioning. Okay. But then when we are looking at gendered bodies, this is not something that is limited only to women. Because a man's body is also gendered in so many ways. No? I mean, the kind of ideologies that are associated with man, okay, which of course is going to reveal his masculinity, is also something that is already there, that is already established. So let's just look at the way the bodies are gendered. So a girl who is born into one particular society, let's say an Indian society, or it could be an Islamic society. Let's just take Islamic society, for instance. A girl who is born into that particular society will have to, probably cover her face, okay, cover her entire body. And covering of the head is also something that is very much part of Hindu, certain Hindu communities also, as a mark of respect. Okay, I think up north or in Rajasthan, in certain communities, women are compulsory, at least in formal occasions, you will have to cover your head. Okay, so your body is being, policed. This kind of a policing is actually very discreet. Nobody's, coming and doing this. Obviously, this is not something that. The punishment is not immediate. It's not that something that is obviously over there. Okay, the punitive measures I'm talking of. It's not obvious like how you have within the law and order, or what we generally have when we break a particular rule or a law that we generally see. It's not there. But these ideologies or these norms are very much internalized by us. Okay, and when we tend to deviate that. It took such a long time for women to start wearing trousers, because women were supposed to wear frocks, okay, or they were supposed to wear a fully covered, in those days probably a fully covered maxi as it is called. But it took quite some time for women to start wearing trousers, okay. And then much later, of course, we started wearing shorts now. Now girls are wearing shorts and they find it more comfortable. All these changes have come much, much later. But still in many parts of India, girls can't wear shorts and go outside. That is a kind of a repercussion that you'll have to face. If you're going to be sexually molested somewhere outside, then this whole thing is turned against the girl who was probably wearing shorts. This is something that we see. So this kind of moral policing, this kind of ideological conditioning that is there as far as women dressing in one particular way and men who are supposed to dress in one particular way is sort of established. And we all align with this. We very rarely, we just question this, okay? So when you're talking of societal, the impact of the society on gender construction, I think the minute that you're born into this world, okay, till you leave this earth, I think your body is conditioned. You're psychologically, you're ideologically shaped by all these gender norms, values that are laid out by that particular society. Let's just take this, and also this, when it comes to gendered body, I just cannot but discuss or point to the thing that is going on now in very recently in Texas. Just yesterday, they have come out with a ban on women going in for abortion after 6 weeks, after 6 weeks of pregnancy. So this started. So that is what I just really wonder whether all those, because this started in 1960s with the second wave of feminism, the right to body and right to life. The whole thing between the church which emphasized that the right to life. A life is being born, so we need to. We cannot go in for abortion. And women were clamoring. Women wanted a right to their body, exercise their right to their body. So this was something which happened in the 1960s, and abortion was legalized. Okay, but now I mean, almost some 40, 50, 60 years, we're still going back. Are we regressing? Are we going back? Okay, and this is coming from US, which is supposed to be the starting point for all these liberatory and empowering and feminist movements. It all comes from there, and there it is regressing. Okay, after 6 weeks, because I think in some cases girls or women don't even realize they are pregnant. You know, it takes some time for them to realize, to diagnose pregnancy, and probably 6 weeks have already elapsed, and then you can't go and abort the infant. So that is also a very important thing, where the body is gendered. You know, the kind of rigid norms that are there. So when we are discussing this of women, there are also certain things that we have to look at masculinity, the norms pertaining to masculinity, because that also is very, very oppressive for boys and men, you know, because the whole thing about the whole ideology, I mean, leave alone the dressing and all those, but even the way you're supposed to conduct yourself, like even in moments of grief, you know, I always feel that if there is a death in the family, the dear one, probably the girls or women at least have the luxury to sit and cry. The son might be much younger, the daughter might be older, the daughter has the luxury to sit and cry. The son might just be in his college, in his first year or second year college, but then he has to show that kind of a stoicism. He has to be stoic. He has to take up all the responsibilities, and he has to muster this. He should have the stomach to muster all these things, muster courage and face the situation, you know. So that is also very, very oppressive. So this kind of gendered body and gendered subjectivity is something that is not limited only to women. I think it is sort of extends, or it is very oppressive even for men. And then men who are supposed to be very courageous, and then who are not supposed to be shy. Okay, only women can be shy. Only women can be very nervous. And also women should be shy, not can be. Women should be shy, women should be nervous, women should be soft, women should not have a roaring laughter. There are so many things which are conditioned, which, I mean, when you talk of body, when you think of gendered body and gendered subjectivity, there are so many things that come to your mind. And then on the other hand, men will have to be, like even in the way they walk, you know, the women are supposed to take soft steps. Whereas men will have to take big strides, you know, and then the way they're supposed to walk with their shoulders erect like this, with their head erect and their shoulders. So all these things are actually gender norms, which we imbibe, which we take in. And then this is not formally taught, you know, this is not inculcated to us like how we learn something. It's not that, but we acquire this very naturally. This is a natural acquisition, and we take in, we imbibe, and then we perform it, and then we pass it on, unless and until we are going to question. So if you're going to ask me society's impact, I would just go back to what I mentioned some minutes ago, that right from a person's birth till death, the society is there everywhere. Even the way the body is supposed to be disposed, okay, that is again a body, you know, and then the way it is supposed to be, the society has its own norms, how it can be. Yeah.
So,
you have
that's
anything
really
else,
well.
regarding this? I also want to know your inputs here.
Ma'am, so would you say specifically that the sort of things that oppress men and the sort of things that oppress women fall under the same blanket, essentially the same ideology of patriarchy?
No, that I wouldn't say it's on the same plank. Of course not. The degrees definitely vary. But what I'm trying to point out is that these gender norms and then the way the body is gendered is something that is not limited to only to women. Yeah. Men are also undergoing it. But I would say that for very few men, it is oppressive. It's actually very advantageous to men to behave in one. I mean, probably it is oppressive. I'm not saying it's not, but it cannot be compared to the kind of oppression, to the kind of moral policing that a woman's body is undergoing. Definitely not. We cannot compare that. Though, of course, there are norms, gendered body and then gendered subjectivity is something that is common to man and woman, but then the degrees vary. And then patriarchy, as you pointed out, is actually male domination, where the rules and norms and everything comes from men. So it is to their advantage. Yeah.
So we can say that the patriarchy has its gender norms that oppresses both men and women, but as it turns out, men are the ones who benefit from the system.
Exactly.
It's not that they necessarily are the ones who perpetuate it, but they're the ones who are in positions of power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Raima, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so moving on from that, ma'am, what can you say about the construction of gender within the Hindu identity?
Yeah. So when we discuss Hindu society, we cannot but talk about caste system because both are intertwined. And then before we go into the emergence of caste system itself and what the caste system is all about, we all know this is something that is common knowledge that in the pre-Vedic societies, because only with the Vedic age, the general understanding is, so the emergence of the caste system happened only with the Vedic age. Okay, with the late Vedic age, actually. It sort of consolidated all those 4 different orders, and then the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras, and of course the Avarnas. The Varna system emerged from there. But before that, before the Vedic age, in the pre-Vedic age, like it was primarily hunting and gathering societies, and it was supposed to be. Of course, there are debates against this. This is sort of now being questioned. There's a lot of research going on, but there was a general understanding that man and woman had equal status within the society. Okay. Now, let's just come to the caste system itself. What do you think perpetuates, or why? How do you think the caste system, which emerged in the late Vedic age, that is centuries ago, how do you think that it sustains till now? How does that happen? Do you have any idea about it? How do you think that it continues till date? It is sustained over centuries. Yeah.
I think if we find that people put themselves in a position of power, just like we have seen in patriarchy, we can see the same thing in a Brahminical patriarchy, as it were. And then sort of and then sustain that with religious ideals.
Okay.
Or with a sense of you have brought up the topic of purity and things like that, and then sustain it with those ideals so that they can't be questioned by the lower class. And why would the upper class want to question those things if they are being benefited?
Okay. So you're saying that the caste system itself is premised on ideals of purity and pollution. This is something that we know. The higher the caste, then purer they are, and then as the caste go down in the ladder, then they are polluted. Okay, this notion, the entire system is premised on the ideologies of purity and pollution, and the most polluted, of course, are the Avarnas or the scheduled caste. But how do you think this non-questioning, probably non-resistance, as we can call, could be one thing, but resistance was there. The scheduled caste movements, anti-caste movements had happened in so many places. It is still continuing. But if you are going to look at what is the one thing that has led to the continuation of the caste system itself, this is something that Ambedkar pointed out. It is endogamy, the practice of endogamy. Okay. So what is endogamy? Endogamy is marrying within the caste. So if you marry within the caste, if a girl and a boy marries within the same caste, then the child that is born, okay, the offspring is also of the same caste, and then the caste lineage continues. Okay. Now, if the caste system is premised on, or the continuation of the caste system is premised on the practice of endogamy, women play a very, very pivotal role within it. So female sexuality is actually a very, very pivotal part of endogamy itself, the whole process. Why is it so? Because it is the woman who's going to give birth to a child. So she has a purpose within the caste society. Okay. Now, the emergence of patriarchal norms actually come from this idea, that it is the woman who is going to give birth to the child. To a child, and in particular the male child, the boy child, and in turn she is going to help enable in continuing the family lineage, the caste lineage, whatever it is. Now, this woman should now be safeguarded. her purity is very, very important. She should be guarded within the house. Okay, so patriarchal norms will emerge, male domination will emerge. So, okay, she should be kept within the household, and that is why if you go and talk to your grandmothers and all, they got married in the pre-puberty age, and they very rarely went out to study. Okay, you just go and talk to your great grandmother, or just talk to your grandmother. They'll say that this was how it was. Okay, so her purity is very, very important. Okay, her purity in the sense, her virginity is very, very important. So caste purity itself is synonymous with a woman's purity. So she plays a very, very pivotal role in maintaining the purity of that particular caste. So if you take the Hindu ritual of the rituals that are associated within a Hindu wedding, you have this practice called, this ritual called Kanyadan. Now, what is it? What do you think is the meaning of Kanyadan? Kanya, of course, has one meaning. It's a girl, but then it also connotes a person who's a virgin, a Kanya, no, who's a virgin. So her virginity, she being a virgin, is very, very important. Okay. Now you might ask me that whether this ideology still continues. Yes, it is. Why do you think that honor killings are happening now? Because the woman has crossed the caste border. Okay, she's gone out, and the purity of that particular family or the particular caste is now defiled. That is why honor killings are still happening. So a woman's purity is very, very essential, and it is the purity of that particular family or that particular caste is actually based on the purity of the women of that particular caste. Okay. Now, very interestingly, though of course women's purity is very, very important, like I would call it, it is interesting, but it is also very paradoxical. Okay, because a woman is supposed to be intrinsically impure. Man is supposed to be pure. He's born pure, and he remains pure throughout his life. But a woman is supposed to be intrinsically impure. Why? Because she undergoes a menstrual cycle. No? Because she undergoes a menstrual cycle once in a month or once in 28 days, she is considered to be impure. That is why you'll find that all the priests, okay, are men. Very rarely you find women performing all these rituals. It will be only the priest or the men in the family who will perform all the religious rituals, especially within the caste society. It is because of this. Okay? And there are so many ideologies that are associated with the impurity of women. Okay. Now, if a woman is in a menstrual cycle or has a period, as it is very colloquially called, referred to, she's not allowed entry into the puja room. Or in some houses, she has to sit aside. She cannot come and mingle with the other spaces. Even within the domestic space, she cannot go to all the places. She cannot enter the kitchen, or she cannot go to the puja room. She can definitely not. Now, of course, women come out and work. That's a different story. But definitely, she cannot participate in all these religious functions. Most importantly, she cannot enter the temple. So this is something that, I hope you are all very familiar with. Now, there are certain temples, in almost most of the temples, women are not, menstruating women are not supposed to enter during the time of menstruation. This is something that is there, and women follow it. They go only after 5 or 6 days, after they take a very ritual bath of cleansing themselves or whatever. But there are certain temples which deny entry for women, where women are denied entry. Shani Singapore is one place, which of course now I think it is opened after all their resistance. But an ongoing debate is of course this whole thing about the Sabrimala temple, where men are only allowed to worship or enter the premises, the temple premises, and most importantly, the sanctum sanctorum. So and there were so many women who were, who were against this, against the entry of women inside the temple. The main reason, because women are considered to be impure, because of this one reason. Okay. So there's a lot of paradox in this entire gender construction over here as far as the caste society is concerned. On the one hand, woman's purity is very, very important. She being a virgin at the time of marriage, this whole concept of Kanyadan is something that is very much prevalent. Okay, so she has to remain pure. I mean, there is a lot of insistence on the woman's purity. But on the other hand, she is, she is intrinsically impure. That is why she cannot partake in any of the religious rituals if she is menstruating. And very rarely you find women priests. That is one thing. Another thing which is very, very striking is, of course, the utility purpose that is there as far as women are concerned. Okay, women have a utility, have a role to play within this whole thing of marriage. Within the, of course, this the whole thing is patriarchal. She has a role to play within the marriage as continuing the lineage by giving birth, by procreating. That is her only role. Now, if you look at the kind of customs we had as far as a widow is concerned. Once a woman loses her husband, once the husband dies, she did not have a very role to play within the society. Okay, now she and most importantly, she has to give birth to a boy child. The insistence on the boy child was there throughout. It still continues in so many places, in so many parts of India, which of course leads to female infanticide and all those. Okay, that's a different story. But then, very interestingly, you'll find that once she loses her husband, she does not have any role to play. Okay, and she has to either get into the pyre and perform sati, die along with her husband. Otherwise, she is ostracized. In Kerala, there are communities, antarjanam, women who do not, women don't come out of the household at all, and especially if they are widows, they are just kept aside in one particular place where they cannot see the outside world at all. I think in many places also, I recall one movie, Water, by Deepa Mehta, which also talks of widows who are abandoned, and then they have to go and join a religious mud for their survival. So the woman does not, a widow does not have any kind of utility, okay, within the within the matrimony, and then she's kept aside. She's in fact discarded, symbolically discarded. I wouldn't say physically. Now that does not happen. And the ideologies that are associated with widowhood is also something that continues till date. Now, you might be that woman might be highly educated, she might be working, and then she might be financially independent. But still, if she becomes a widow, she is in certain religious functions, so her presence is supposed to be inauspicious. This is something that we have come across. Okay, I hope that you've also come across or heard such things. So a widow's presence is still considered to be inauspicious because of these kinds of ideologies or these notions that are embedded, that we have internalized, and it is the women who are insisting. It is not, I wouldn't say men are not worried about it. Men are relaxed because women are there to continue all these norms. Women do the moral policing for the other women. Okay, so that is what is happening. Now you might question that how is it that women continue all these things? How is it that women have accepted? Of course, we are all subjects, and then this gender subjectivity is something that we already discussed, where we imbibe all these norms. We want to be part of a society. We don't want to be the odd man out. This herd instinct is always there. So we take in all this and we also perform it. But women tend to have taken this with full subservience, I would say. How is it so? There's a lot of allegiance to it. No, you can find that because it's the women who are who do the moral policing. How does that happen? It is because of this whole concept called pativrata. Who is a pativrata? A pativrata is a woman who is married, a married woman who devotes her entire time and energy in taking care of her husband. Husband is put on a pedestal. That is a different story. It does not happen now, but I'll tell you how it still continues. Okay, and caring and nourishing her children. A woman's primary role, okay, is to take care of the family. Be a pativrata. And you might question that notion of pativrata is something that is probably not there now. Definitely, we are not, putting the man on the pedestal. We are not worshipping him. But what is Karwa Chauth? Okay, Karwa Chauth is actually a reflection of these ideologies which we have internalized. Okay, up north, I think it is Karwa Chauth. South also, we have a similar kind of a function where women would, married women would fast the whole day for the well-being of their husband. Now, this whole debate as to whether men are doing it or not is it will take us in a different direction. But what we need to understand over here is that the kind of ideologies that are associated with being a pativrata and the kind of importance that is given to the well-being of the man, because in those days, if the man dies, if the husband dies, she's economically dependent on him. Okay, and of course, her entire life is lost. And this whole thing and the inauspiciousness that is associated with widowhood is also something that is, that would terrify her. Okay, so of course this Karwa Chauth was probably there. The man is worshipped as a husband because her entire livelihood is dependent on the man. But now an independent working woman, why do you think that still continues? Because of these ideologies that are associated with widowhood, the inauspiciousness that is associated with a widow. Okay, so so that way, we still sort of endorse all these ideologies. We cannot say that, we are now in the 21st century and the concept of pativrata and all these ideologies have vanished or diminishing. It's very much there. We need to, dig and see. We need to introspect and see what is, what is happening around us and how we as women respond to all these things is something that we need to see. Okay, so yeah. I think I've almost, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, so
one thing more I want to add over here. When you're talking about pativrata, the greatest irony is we have a lot of women goddesses as part of the Hindu pantheon. You have Lakshmi as god. Lakshmi is considered the goddess of wealth, and Saraswati as a goddess of learning. Very ironically, in spite of having all these women goddesses as part of the Hindu pantheon, I think women were allowed to allowed to have access to education much later. Though of course we did have Saraswati Puja being performed. It's a woman who's sitting there, as a goddess of learning. We all pray to her. There is of course a festival or a function called Saraswati. A ritual, a religious ritual called Saraswati Puja, where she is of course worshipped. But that does not deter all these gender norms. It continues till date. I think we need to keep that also in mind. Yeah.
Ma'am, so if you can say specifically about the caste system, what is the construction of the feminine gender uniform or unitary within the caste system?
No. See, whatever we discuss now is actually pertaining to the caste higher in the ladder, otherwise called upper caste. Of course, we shouldn't be referring to them as upper caste or lower caste now. Okay, they are now called caste Hindus who abide by the caste norms. Okay. So all these pertain to the caste Hindu women. Now, so for a very long time, they were denied access to education, and then women couldn't come out and work. So all this happened only after the 1960s and 1970s. Okay, but then, so the kind of oppression that they went through, or the kind of problems that women from the upper caste or caste Hindus, what they had was pertaining to dowry. Okay, issues pertaining to dowry or female infanticide, bride burning. Okay, all these were very much in vogue until the latter decades of the 20th century. It was very much going on. Female infanticide, I think, is still going on. Dowry, I think, in some places, in some parts of India, it still goes on. It happens very discreetly. Now, all this pertains to caste Hindu women. On the other side, you have the women from the lower caste or caste which were excluded from the from the caste ladder or the Varna system itself. Now that is why Sharmila Rage and Uma Chakravarti, all of them, all feminists, of course, Indian feminists, they refer to the patriarchal system within the caste society as graded patriarchies. Because there isn't one particular form of patriarchy which is prevalent. There are multiple patriarchies within the caste society. So, at the apex, of course, is Brahminical patriarchy. Okay, But so women, women are part of one particular caste, and then there are gender norms that are prevalent, patriarchal norms that that are there with within that particular caste, and then they align with that, and they start following it. Okay, so at the apex is Brahminical patriarchy. On the other end, you have women, so they did not come out to work, so their kind of problems is entirely different from the kind of issues that women from the lower caste or Dalit caste, scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, what they faced. Okay, otherwise called the Shudras. Now, of course, they are referred to as, constitutionally referred to as OBCs. So the OBCs, Dalits, and the tribals, what kind of issues that did they face? Their issues were entirely different. Their kind of oppression was entirely different. So intersectional oppression, of course, as it was the same. Okay, intersectional oppression of caste and gender was something that let's take the example of a woman from a Brahmin caste. What she undergoes is also intersectional oppression, but what the Dalit woman undergoes is also intersectional oppression, but there is a lot of variation. It is sort of graded now. Like a woman from a scheduled caste or a Dalit woman had this necessity to come out and work, okay, for economic survival. At least the women from the caste Hindu families, they had this luxury of sitting at home. Of course, there was a lot of domestic violence which is going on. So they were subjected to domestic violence, which otherwise is called private patriarchy. Okay, whatever was happening within the house. On the other hand, Dalit women who had this economic necessity to come out and work, they faced what is called public patriarchy. They were oppressed not only at home, they were doubly oppressed, in fact. They were oppressed by the men within the family, but they were also oppressed by the landlords for whom they were working. Okay? So there was not only sexual division of labor, but there was also there was a division of labor, but also there was a sexual division of labor where she was sexually molested, sexually assaulted. There was a lot of sexual exploitation which was going on, which she had to undergo and which she had to put up with. She couldn't question because her economic survival was based on this. Now, if she faced sexual oppression or sexual exploitation by the men outside the house, once she returns to the domestic space, once she returns home, again she has to do a lot of work over there, okay? Because the men, Dalit men, when they went out to work, of course, they also faced exploitation, labor exploitation. They faced a lot of sufferings. But once they came in, they were men. They ruled the family. So in fact, they vented out all their sufferings on the women in the family. They get drunk. They get, they start beating the women. And it's a Dalit woman who ultimately faces both kinds of sufferings and oppression and exploitation, labor exploitation and sexual exploitation. Okay. So this way, the kind of oppression or the kind of patriarchal norms that a caste Hindu woman is put through is entirely different from what a Dalit woman is put through. So, this kind of a divide was came out during the Mandal Commission. When the Mandal Commission Mandal Commission recommendations were implemented. It started off in the 1990s. What happened was there was a lot of opposition. Till then, there was a mainstream feminist movement, okay? And then this feminist, unfortunately, we did not have a mainstream feminist movement like how it happened in the West. We did have a women's movement. But then what happened was this women's movement was also dominated by caste Hindu women, okay? Upper caste women. But then when the Mandal Commission recommendations were implemented, for the first time, these caste divisions within the women came out, and then the issues that Dalit women faced came out in the open, and then there was a necessity for something more to be done. Yeah. So it is not uniform. It is not uniform at all. And there is one thing that we need to look at. Probably you'll understand the kind of sexual exploitation that was there as far as the Dalit woman is concerned. There is this whole thing about this is part of history. This is something that happened at least 30 or 40 years ago. It's not happening now. It seems when a Rajput woman gets married, and she goes into her husband's house, a Daroga woman, a woman from a Daroga caste, okay, a Dalit caste, who's now considered as a Dalit, also goes along with her. Okay. Now the husband has, can sexually, have a sexual relationship with this Daroga woman. That is allowed. And this Daroga woman might have been married also. Okay. But still, what is underlined over here is that she is actually a slave. She goes she goes as a slave, and then she's also sexually exploited. And it seems there are offsprings of this kind of union, this kind of a relationship, sexual relationship between the Rajput husband, okay, and the Daroga woman. And it seems such offsprings are called Koswal Rajputs. So it is it was very much there, at least till the 19th and early 20th century. Probably things are changing now. Okay, there are a lot of movies based on this kind of a sexual exploitation. Probably you can go and read them. Yeah, read or watch such movies. Yeah.
Right, ma'am. So continuing on what you just spoke about, what can be said about the lack of Dalit women's representation within both women and Dalit movements?
Yeah, lack of representation, I think I already touched upon it when we were discussing the graded patriarchy. So this whole thing came out, I told you, with the Mandal Commission recommendations that started off in the 1990s. Okay, and now it is, of course, implemented. There is one incident that Uma Chakravarti, the Indian feminist, she's written a book called Theorizing Feminism. And in the preface, she writes that in the 1990s, when these recommendations came out for the first time, there was a lot of agitation which was going on. Self-immolation was happening because of this OBC reservation. Okay. And then, she's a college professor in Delhi. And it seems she was going to college as usual. And then there were a lot of strikes which were happening. And then she found a group of students, a group of girl students from her college. And then she knew that these are all students. Probably she knew these girls. She says in the preface that these girls were from upper caste families. And then they were holding a placard saying that we don't want unemployed husbands. Okay. So what they mean to say is that if you're going to give reservation to OBCs, okay, then the men from the OBCs are going to get more jobs, and then men from our caste are not going to get jobs. This is what is the implication. This is what the placard says. We don't want unemployed husbands. So she says the question that she is raising over here is that, of course, if the OBC reservation is going to be implemented, there are going to be more men from that particular caste of that category who are going to get jobs, and then jobs are going to become less for the other caste, or they are called general category, general category men. But then she's raising this question. Uma Chakravarti raises this question as to what is preventing these girls who belong to caste Hindu families. What is preventing these girls from getting married to these OBC men? Okay. So she says for the first time in the 1990s, for the first time, there came a realization within the social sciences. Social sciences, of course, social science departments, especially sociology departments, looks into all these caste and gender discourses. So gender was supposed to be something which was gender oppression, as women's oppression was supposed to be uniform. And then, there wasn't a kind of a divide that was emerging at all. That angle was not reflected upon at all. But for the first time, she says that, she feels that this kind of a caste consciousness is slowly coming in amongst women. Okay. And there is this kind of a divide is reflected as far as the women's movement is concerned. I already told you when we were discussing graded patriarchy that we did not have an overarching feminist movement like how it happened in the West. The three waves of feminism and all did not happen in the West. Happened in the West. Happened in the West. It did not happen in India. We had what is called women's movement. And very ironically, it was the men, social reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who actually initiated these, the women's movement, in the sense that they were very progressive, and this was part of the nationalist movement also. Men who were exposed to Western ideals in the early decades of the 20th century, they felt that women, the child marriage should stop, and then sati should be abolished, and then women should have access to education. So all these things were happening, So we did not have an overarching feminist movement. We did have women's movement, and we did not. And this women's movement is also not mainstream women's movement. women did come together for certain reasons. Okay, so they did come together when the trees were cut in Orissa, the Chipko movement. Women came together, and then against alcoholism in Telangana, against bride burning, against dowry, against female infanticide. They come together for certain issues. Otherwise, we don't have an overarching women's movement as such, or a feminist movement as such. But even the kind of issues that women came together for did not represent the issues or the kind of oppression that, especially the sexual exploitation that Dalit women were undergoing. So, in the 1990s, when the recommendations came out, when the Mandal Commission's recommendations came out, and when there was a lot of resistance for the implementation of the Mandal Commission recommendations, the divide, like it not only led to the caste divide, okay, but it also led to the kind of the division of caste within the women's movement itself. Though, of course, we do not have an overarching women's movement, but still, the kind of issues that women have come forward for is actually relating to that pertaining to the caste Hindu families. Okay, what about the kind of oppression that Dalit women are undergoing? Okay, so women come together. The Dalit women come together, and then just as it happened in the in the US, because US of course had a very strong feminist movement. The three waves of the second wave of feminism itself happened in the US. In fact, the first wave happened in Europe and in England, but the second wave shifted and it happened in the US. And this started off in the 1950s. It went until the 1970s and early 1980s, and then just as Dalit women were left out, the problems that the African American women were facing over there in terms of the kind of double oppression that they faced in terms of both race and also in terms of gender, that was not coming out at all. Okay, so what they did was they came together and they started, Alice Walker and Maya Angelou, all of them come together and they start a African American feminist movement. Okay, and this was very much necessary, because they felt that the African American movement, the liberation movement itself was male dominated. They did not bother about the kind of issues, gender issues that the women faced within the community. They were focusing on racial issues. And the mainstream feminist movement, they bothered only about the gender issues. They did not bother about the racial issues. Now, the African American women were facing intersectional oppression based on racial and gender structures that were prevalent within the US. So there was a necessity for them to come out with an African American feminist movement, and it was both a political movement and there was also a very strong literary movement also. Okay. Now let's come to what happened over here in India in the 1990s. I told you that this kind of a divide, the caste divide within the women's movement, came out in the open, and there was a necessity for Dalit women now to come together and start a movement. They did start a Dalit feminist movement, okay? Because like the African American movement, the Dalit movement also was male dominated. They did not bother about gender issues. They bothered only about caste issues. And the women's movement, they did not bother about Dalit women's issues, the intersectional oppression that she was facing. So what they did was they came together in the 1990s. You have the emergence of the Dalit feminist movement, but it did not become a very strong political movement like the African American movement. This is something that we need to see. There wasn't a very strong, political movement, but it became a very strong literary movement, because there were a lot of Dalit women writers who started writing. You have Bama and then Kumud Pav, a lot of them, Baby Kamble, and they started, of course, writing in their vernacular, in the regional languages, and this got translated into English. So you have a kind of a literary movement that happened as far as Dalit women are concerned. We do not have a very strong Dalit feminist political movement, and then how far these the literatures that they are writing is enabling liberation or empowerment for them is something that we need to the question. We need to look into that and we need to see. Yeah.
Ma'am, so like you had mentioned, the Dalit women's movement and the Dalit writers who are available. So can you give us some examples of these? Like talk about those resistances, those movements, those literature that somebody can read to learn more about these issues.
There are many. In fact, I can send you a list. Okay, I can also post some videos. Okay, some of these most important are Bama's Karku. It's an autobiography. And then Bama's Sankati. She's written others. She's written so much. She's a Tamil Dalit feminist writer. And then Kubut Pavde. Okay. And then Baby Kamble. There are many Marathi women writers. There are like across India in all the regional languages. In each region, you have a lot of writers. If you want, I'm just coming out with the most important, Shivakami, and then many of them are there. But if you're going to ask me for a list, then I can probably help you with sending you, like emailing you the list of writers, and I can also suggest certain videos that if you're interested to watch, you can watch them. Okay. I would say that there are a lot of documentaries pertaining to Dalit women's issues in general, and Dalit women in particular. I can give a list of such videos. You can watch all those videos. And if you're talking of women's writing, if you want to read, of course, keeping Dalit women apart, of course, I can send you the list. If you're looking at women's writing, there are two very wonderful volumes compiled by Susi Taru and then K. Lalita. Two volumes are called Women Writing in India. So right from the Therigatas, Buddhist bhikkhunis, women's writing, of course, begins from there. The Therikadas. In fact, it takes us back to the Bhakti movement. Bhakti movement, if you look at Bhakti movement itself, which of course began in the 6th century, it was anti-Brahminical, and then it was anti-Sanskrit also, because they started writing in vernacular. You have a lot of women who are part of the Bhakti movement, and then you have the Mirabai and then Soirabai. So there's also a kind of research which is now going on. Of course, this is that extreme devotion to God, and of course all their verses are about their worship and devotion to God, and it's mostly bhajans. Okay. But then the underlying this underlying move of joining the Bhakti movement itself. Mirabai left her family, okay, and then went and joined the Bhakti movement. Became a devotee of Krishna. But then, there's a lot of research, or there's a lot of questioning going on among the academia who are working on women's issues as to whether Mirabai herself was sort of constrained by all these gender norms within the society, within the caste society, and she wanted a kind of liberation from that. She wanted to move away from that, and the one in those times, in that particular context, the only way you can come out of your family ties, you can come out, okay, was only through bhakti. Okay, and probably that could be one reason. That is why you have a lot of women, they say. So if you want to read women's writing, I would suggest this Women Writing in India. And then there are a lot of short stories and poems which are written in the vernacular, but then they're translated into English. That is why I'm saying this is better for you have access to women's writing across India in different languages, written in different languages, but translated into English. And then a lot of them are there. I think some of it I just did post to you. I just sent it to you. I sent it to you. Please read Girls by Mrinal Pandey. You can. So it talks about this Kanya Puja that is being performed during the Navaratri times. Where the Kanyas, the young girls who have not attained puberty, the way they are, a kind of puja that is done for them. So the whole story is from the point of view is from the perspective of a very young girl, of a small little girl who is just probably 10 years old, and then the mother is now pregnant, and then she's already got a older sister, and then they are going to the Nani's house, and then throughout this worry, this mother has this worry. It's a third pregnancy. The entire this discussion is only about this third child. This child should be a boy, and how the boys within the family, the grandson within the family, her nephew is given a lot of importance by the nanny, and then so she's observing all these things, and then this kind of gendered body is something also that you can find. She's told that you shouldn't be laughing like this, you shouldn't be jumping like a monkey, you're a girl now, you learn to behave. All these things are told to her, and this girl is just wondering that one fine day she wakes up, and then Nani's putting tilak on her, and then she says, today you are the Kanya and I'll have to worship you, and then she's an aarti is being performed. She does not take it at all, and she says, throughout I'm being put down as a girl, and there's so much of preference for a boy child and for the grandson, But then on one particular day, I become very important and you're performing a puja, and then how can I accept it? And then she runs away. It's from a child's perspective, a young, a little girl's perspective. So if you read that, you'll just have, you can reflect on whatever we discuss now, gender, body, and subjectivity, and then the resistance the questioning that comes up much later. And within that same story, you have the older child, that is her older sister, who is not very old in the sense. She must be just 1 or 2 years older to her. How she accepts everything. She is not perturbed at all. She is not questioning. So this questioning spirit is also there only in very few women. So this is something that we can do. Yeah, I'll send you a list across.
Yes, ma'am. We'll try and put this list.
Come to my mind. Yeah.
We'll try and put this list in the description of the video so that whoever wants to check it out can go through those resources.
I can give you the links to the videos, or I can send the videos across. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I also have some videos on Devadasi, but that's a different thing altogether. That is also a gendered body and this whole system of women being dedicated to the temple that happened in south of India. And then they excelling in fine arts, but again the kind of sexual exploitation that was there. How during the colonial period this system was abolished, and then they were all pushed into prostitution, and a lot of sex. And this system still continues in some parts of Karnataka, and then they come off to Goa, and they are dedicated to a particular village temple, and even there's a caste divide. You have the Dalit Devadasis and the Devadasis who belong to the upper caste, and then the kind of social divide that is there. So the system has stopped as far as the caste Hindus are concerned, okay? The OBCs are concerned, but it still continues within the Dalit community. And then, young girls as early as 10 or 12, they're dedicated to the minute they attain puberty, then they're dedicated to the temple, and then the priest and the patriarch within that village, she's exploited, and then she's brought to Goa, and then she's pushed into prostitution. So this is something that goes on. And again, this whole thing about gendered body, and then how the caste society sort of accepts this. This comes from the religious scriptures. They say how temple becomes the arbiter of all things pertaining to gender norms, or women's position within the societies, or caste society is also something that we can look at. So I have some videos pertaining to that also. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Rema, do you want to sign off?
Right. So with this, we've come to the end of our session. Thank you, ma'am, for agreeing to this. This was very educational, and I'm sure anyone who will be listening to this has...
Okay, thank you.